Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So I came across your page about narcissistic abuse, and it's something that I keep seeing on Instagram and on social media that there's the hashtag is kind of going crazy right now.
Mhm.
And you have a page that is trying to help people figure out the symptoms of what that looks like. Could they possibly be dating or in a relationship or even married to someone with narcissistic traits that could lead to an unhealthy dynamic that could lead to abuse?
Mhm.
What made you decide to do this kind of work?
Um, it's kind of a slow progress because when I was younger, I experienced narcissistic abuse within the home. And I grew up with a narcissistic parent that really taught me how to deal with abuse. And it was a very unhealthy pattern that continued to cycle out through my friendships and my relationships as I got older. And I never really realized that it was abuse. I always just thought that, this is just how life is. We just go through these things, we work them out. And it wasn't until I had a long-term relationship that made me lose a lot of weight. I was losing my hair. I had pregnancy complications. Um, I was horribly depressed. And I started reaching out to my therapist that I would see on and off throughout the years. And she actually brought up to me that what I was experiencing was most likely narcissistic abuse. And she was the one who brought this to light to me. And once we started discussing it and I started doing all this research on my own, I like a light bulb went off and it just clicked like, oh my God, there's an answer for everything that I've been going through. I'm not crazy. There is something wrong. And I was still very much in that relationship and I was still involved with my family at the time. And so I had a hard time trying to figure out how to spread knowledge of this without the repercussions of it. And so I created the Instagram account, the Narcissist Abuse Guide, anonymously. I didn't show my face. I didn't attach my name, my email, nothing. And it very quickly took off. People were asking me for help, for questions. They wanted more information. And once I started to break away from my narcissistic relationships, I became a little bit more braver to speak out about the abuse. Um, and I thought how selfish of me and how kind of backwards that I'm telling people to stand up against this abuse, but I'm hiding behind a screen myself. And that's when I started to kind of come out more publicly about it. But since then, it has really grown. And I have been so touched by everyone sharing their stories. And it helped not only them realize that they're going through abuse, but it helped also validate me that what I was experiencing was real. So it's been really interesting.
That is very courageous, but you were also very thoughtful about how you were going to disclose this, because if you are in any kind of abusive dynamic, you don't want to put yourself at risk for more harm or hurt. And as we know, if there's ever children involved or your livelihood at stake, the last thing you need is for an abusive personality to blow up your life because you're voicing this.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Then there's smear campaigns, there's gaslighting, the abuse doesn't stop once you leave. And so once people do speak out about it, it usually does result in some sort of retaliation. So I try to also be respectful of everybody from my past because my goal isn't to call out people or shame people. It's to try to educate and bring awareness to it.
And when we talk about bringing awareness, what exactly is narcissistic abuse? What is the characterization of that? And I know you're
Sure.
a therapist, that you're going to school, but from your experience.
So from my experience, narcissism really derives from having ego. So truly all humans across the board have some sort of degree of narcissism in them. It's what gives us the confidence that we have, to say that we look beautiful today. It's a healthy amount of narcissism. But what happens is that there's a lot of insecurities that come about that derive a toxic narcissism. And so with that toxic narcissism, people tend to love to manipulate others and control others through abuse tactics, such as gaslighting, which is where, they try to create self-doubt and confusion in the victim's mind, or, they do smear campaigns, which is where they try to make the victim look crazy. Or like the abuser. And so with all of those traits, they kind of come together into different categories. And what I think that a lot of people don't realize, because everyone hears about narcissistic personality disorder, but with narcissistic personality disorder, someone has to meet 5 of the 9 criteria that is in the DSM-5 handbook for personality disorders. So this handbook breaks down exactly what a person with NPD has, but you have to meet 5 of them in order to be diagnosed. So someone could still have 4 toxic narcissistic traits, like being very egotistic, having a self-indulgence in oneself, feeling like they're superior to others. But if they only meet the 4, they don't qualify for the disorder. Mm-hmm. So being narcissistic really is all about having, a deep insecurity issue where the ego pushes them to do toxic manipulative things towards others.
Right. And in order to get a diagnosis, it has to be through a licensed counselor, therapist, psychologist, in order to be able to be given that diagnosis. Other than that, like you said, it's just another person recognizing those traits and saying, I don't want any part of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's very hard to get a diagnosis for
right.
NPD. It's, people who are narcissistic don't want to admit that there's anything wrong with them. To them, they're perfect. Everyone else is the issue. Right. So to get somebody in a room to go through all the tests and to go through the therapy is nearly impossible.
So what are some of the signs that someone could be having narcissistic traits that could be very toxic to another human being? Because right now it's like, if someone wants to be a narcissist on their own time, and not affect other people, go for it. But sure. Usually narcissists feed off of other human beings, almost like a parasitic relationship. And I've heard trigger terms like people are supply, right? Mm-hmm. So how does that impact? Let's say you have the person with the narcissistic trait and then you have another human being. Like, how would that dynamic work out between these two people?
It is being in a relationship or of any kind, whether it's romantically, friendship, or family related, being with somebody who's narcissistic is extremely draining. And it's something that you might not notice at the beginning because you'll go through this huge high with the person where, they're love bombing you. They're giving you excessive admiration. They want to spend all this time with you way too soon. They might be showering you with gifts. So all these huge, like grandiose, affectionate, things are going to be happening. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like they're going to start plucking those things away from you. So where they used to say, oh my gosh, you're the most beautiful person on the planet, they're going to start picking at your self-confidence to say, oh my God, why'd you do your hair like that today? You look horrible. Go fix it. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you're leaving the house like that today. Like, you should be horrified. And it might not seem like a big deal at first because you'll be like, oh, well, okay, I'll just go change my clothes or I'll go fix my hair and then move on with your day. But as time goes on, that little bit of picking turns into more of a dramatic experience where now there's a lot of control and manipulation. You might not be able to go hang out with your friends because your boyfriend is giving you 50 calls in a row, trying to figure out where you are and yelling at you because you're not home at, noon when you said you were going to be, and it's now, 5 afternoon. So it's a very slow process, but I think that what people need to realize is that if things are moving at a very fast pace, it might be a red flag. And it doesn't mean that you have to leave the person immediately, but it just means that you have to keep your eyes open and see what kind of happens as you continue. And once you set those boundaries saying, listen, like, I can't hang out today, we can hang out on Saturday, see what their reaction is like. Are they upset? Are they angry at you? Or are they going to respect that boundary and say, yes, of course, like, that's totally fine. So it's really all about taking things slow and keeping your eyes open for the red flags.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned a few of those red flags, is there ever like a timeline for when someone really will start showing who they are, or is it more just in their actions? Because if anyone says within the first couple of dates, I think I'm in love with you, I want to marry you.
Oh yeah.
Probably
that's a red flag.
I mean, yes, there's those outlier relationships where people fall in love and get married in 3 months, but they're very rare. And as you get older and you come with more history of your life, you're more hesitant to say or do those kinds of things. So going back to, is there like a time frame where someone will kind of reveal themselves, or do people with narcissistic traits relatively show who they are in the first 6 months, and it's up to that person to be aware?
So I think it truly depends on the situation of things. I think it depends on how the life kind of goes. And so, you can kind of notice some red flags within the narcissistic person's life at times if they're having a lot of financial issues, if they're constantly trying to move around because they can't keep a home, if they're trying to, if they're losing jobs left and right. And then they're using that to kind of come into your life saying that, oh, I need a place to live. Why don't I just live with you? Or, oh, my phone got shut off. Like maybe I could just come on your phone plan. Like they're trying to plant those seeds. And once you're in at a certain deepness, the abuse will start to unfold because they've kind of almost trapped you in a sense. Once the more things that you have that's keeping you in that relationship, the harder it is to leave. And I know for a lot of people that usually happens when there's marriage with children, because it's more of a binding relationship. Mm-hmm. If you try to leave with the children, you still have to co-parent with the person most likely. And if you are married and going through divorce, they're going to fight you tooth and nail for every single thing that you have going on. And so it really depends on how life takes you guys and what choices you make while you're with the narcissistic person, that the mask will eventually be revealed.
And it just depends upon how involved. I had heard a story of a friend who was with a guy, dated him for years, like 4 years. Mm-hmm. They got married, and as soon as they got married, it was on their honeymoon, he hit her for the first time. And then
oh my God.
It began escalating, and she had to end the marriage within weeks of being married. And she thought she knew, and she took time. So it's very difficult, and that's a scary cautionary tale. But how do you really ever know? Because like you said, some people could keep the mask on for a very, very long time. And
years.
Unfortunately, I hate to use the word victims, but people on the receiving end of this mistreatment are told, well, how didn't you know? Why did you continue? Why did you move in with this person? Why did you allow them to talk to you like this? And be like, well, it wasn't like this all the time. Mm-hmm. We had really good times. We had really good days. I thought they were going through a difficult time, and they just lost their temper a little bit until it happened more and more and more. And like you said, the dynamic of giving and taking and giving and taking and not really knowing. And that's why establishing boundaries is so important. Like you said, how do they respond when you put a boundary up in the beginning? Are they going to say, okay, I understand? Or are they going to freak out?
Oh yeah, of course. And, 9 times out of 10, a narcissistic individual will freak out if you try to set a boundary, and especially if you enforce it. Even something as little as, I've heard a lot of people come to me saying, the narcissistic person, I would be taking a shower and they would come in and they would just like sit next to me, like, we're stand by the sink and like hang out with me. And I'd ask them to leave because I just wanted 5 minutes by myself. And they would get mad saying, well, why do you want to be alone? Like, what are you trying to hide? And so there's a lot of those weird little instances where you're like, well, I'm not trying to hide anything. Like maybe this is normal that you just come in whenever you want. And, maybe I should be okay with it. And it's just, again, those little seeds being planted, that's almost conditioning people.
Yes.
And we're not realizing that we're being conditioned and that abuse is happening until it is too late. And then the victim shaming does really happen.
Yes.
It's kind of what you were talking about a little bit, is that people say, well, why didn't you leave when you saw it? Like, that seems like, you're too smart and you're too pretty. Like, how could you let this happen to yourself? Which only then makes the victim feel worse about the situation and maybe contemplates them not leaving.
Right. Disempowered.
Right.
Because we still have it in society that the onus goes to the person who is being treated. And it's always more of like a he said, she said, she said, she said, he said, whatever it might be, whatever the dynamic might be.
Yeah.
It's like you're fighting something in your court of public opinion, whether that's amongst your family members or, as you saw with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, an actual court case. It's incredibly hard when you are the one in the room seeing these things, but you don't have anyone else to tell you this isn't normal, this isn't right. So a lot of time, like you said, gaslighting, you question yourself. You wonder if it's all in your head. Are you being too sensitive? Are you are you just misinterpreting the behavior and you're getting it wrong? But I think that's more in the beginning, because anything about narcissism, when it becomes any kind of toxic behavior, is like you said, it escalates.
Mhm.
So we're not just talking about someone who's an egomaniac. It's someone who becomes possessive, controlling, verbally abusive, maybe possibly physically abusive. So
Sure.
what does narcissistic abuse actually entail?
It's really a combination. So there's been a lot of back and forth amongst a couple of my posts that, domestic violence is more important to talk about than narcissistic abuse. And it really goes hand in hand because narcissistic abuse is domestic abuse. It
Mhm.
just is, because it involves financial abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, and emotional abuse. And so when you have a narcissistic abusive relationship, it can contain one of those things or a combination of, those four together. And so it could start out with, you have somebody who never hit you, never, pushed you, never did anything, but the name calling that they would say to you would be so astronomical that your own self-worth diminishes.
Mhm.
It could be that, someone is playing mind games with you so much and controlling you so much that psychological abuse is, making you feel like you're the crazy person. And it can get as intense as, some people end up putting themselves in psych wards because they truly feel that they're the ones that are the issue because of what the abuser has put them through.
Wow.
And the abuser gets off scot-free. There's financial abuse where, like I kind of brought up before, sometimes these narcissistic people don't have stable jobs, don't have stable home life, they don't have, a stable family life. And so then they kind of put all of that onto their newest supplier or newest victim. And it can quite literally drain somebody and put them into bankruptcy because that person might refuse to get a job because they have these grand, thoughts of, well, I'm going to be famous one day. I'm going to be a professional video gamer and I'm going to make millions of dollars from YouTube. But it's not realistic because they might be okay at playing video games, but not enough to be a professional video game player. It's an unrealistic thought. And so all those bills end up on the healthy person, which once that supply runs out, the narcissistic person might leave and find someone else. So there's really different facets of narcissistic abuse. And it's really, that's what makes it so hard to spot, is that it can go in any direction.
Mhm. And I kept reading too that many times in those romantic relationships, a lot of cheating happens too, because they need more than one supply, that one person is just not enough. Is there ever situations where, is it always just cheating with narcissistic individuals, or is it just case to case?
In my opinion, I truly think that anyone who cheats is narcissistic. Because I think that they kind of have this idea that, well, I can get whoever I want, where you're not giving me what I want. So I'm going to go find somebody who will, or, something along those lines. And a lot of times there's an overlap in relationships with narcissistic people because they're not dumb. Like they can sense when somebody's starting to figure them out. And if they have any sense that somebody's thinking about leaving, they have to find their backup supply now. So that way, if something happens, if there's a blowout, depending on, whatever the situation is, they have somewhere else to go to for their supply. And so I really do think that infidelity and cheating is probably mainly a narcissistic trait. And, I'm not a professional, but that's just my outlook on it.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and then if you could just clarify. So I'm also seeing things online. What is a covert narcissist? It sounds like they're
Sure.
passing by. When I hear covert narcissist, I'm hearing someone like almost like the Hamburglar,
Yeah.
who's presenting as okay to the world,
Yeah.
but and is, charismatic, engaging as narcissists could be, but
Mhm.
then behind closed doors, they're a terror.
Monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is
So covert narcissism is like one of the hardest to be able to pick up because they love portraying, like they're known for being the vulnerable narcissist. So they love portraying that they're the victim. And so, they always have like a poor what was me attitude where like, oh, I can never find any good friends. Like my friends always end up leaving. And I don't know why, because I always try my best to be the best friend that I can be, but they just don't see me the way that I am and they don't appreciate me. But lo and behold, they keep losing friends because they'll talk badly about their friends to their other friends, where they'll steal money from them, or, whatever the case is, but they don't want other people to know that they were the issue. And so a lot of times in romantic relationships, they want to be portrayed like they are the best husband, the best boyfriend. They want to seem like the most desirable person in the world. And that's very dangerous for a victim because the abuse happens behind closed doors. And when they try to speak out about the abuse, saying, oh my gosh, like my husband has been really just so abusive towards me. He's controlling everything. Like he's making me feel crazy. And they start giving examples. They're not believed because to the outside world, the person looks like he's a wonderful human being and the best loving, supportive parent that there is and all this other stuff. So covert narcissism truly is like the Hamburglar. Like he's just going around waiting for the victims and sneaking, and it's hard to spot.
Yeah, no, and that is a scary thing because I've heard stories where you have someone who will go run to open the door for the person in need, but then let the door slam on their significant other and then go, too bad. It's like in seconds of like the mask, like you keep saying the mask when it falls. What is a malignant narcissist? Because that to me, that's just sheer violent. When I think of a malignant, that's someone who we're talking about like domestic abuse, physical abuse. That's what I think malignant.
Yeah. And so a malignant isn't really part of like narcissistic personality disorder. It's not yet able to be classified in the DSM-5, but it's very much a combination of both narcissistic personality disorder traits and also antisocial personality traits. Okay. And so they basically, when you have those antisocial traits, they don't know how to interact at all. Like there's no self-awareness that what they're doing is bad. They could, this is an extreme, but it's basically like somebody shooting somebody in the face and then saying, oh, they were in my way. That's extreme. That's not what a malignant's going to do, but that's kind of like the mindset where like they do something bad, but to them, oh, it's their fault. They were in my way. It's their problem. It's just a zero recollection to be able to identify that they're doing anything wrong whatsoever. And that's what makes it so dangerous is that, there's no fear of getting in trouble by law. There's no fear of any repercussions. They're just going to do as they please. And they have no empathy for the people that they're hurting.
Right. Ultimately, it's almost like there's a part missing in their brain that allows them to have compassion or empathy for others. And on top of it, they, like you said, there's an antisocial aspect. So they're not going to follow the rules that a quote unquote normal, regular civilian would, because in their heads, they're superior to the rules.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're above it. So that's where the danger lies in. I'm glad that we were able to define this very broadly, of course, and start a conversation, because what I want to talk about too is that once you recognize the signs, how do you safely, and this is the biggest word, how do you safely extract yourself from that person? Because that gets you into a whole other thing where it's not always so easy to break up. If you're in the beginning of a relationship, even if it's a 6-month relationship, if you're dealing with somebody who is that kind of toxic person, you have to remove yourself in a very smart, logical, analytical, methodical way, because you never know what could trigger someone and could put you in more harm. So if you're willing, Autumn, I would love for you to come back so we can discuss that.
Yeah, I would love to, because that really is such a multifaceted part of it, because there's so many different options and there's so many different moving parts. So I would love to come back and discuss that more. And hopefully provide some resources for people. That way, if they are looking for help, they can have the resources they need for it.
Yes. Yes. And again, always, and for anyone watching who might be in a situation right now, don't do anything haphazardly. Don't tell the person that you're in a potentially abusive relationship with that you're going to leave, that you have a plan. You make sure you have some loved ones or a resource, a nonprofit, a hotline, someone that you can reach out to, some money saved up if you don't have your own finances available to you. Make sure you do things almost sneaky like a ninja, like we said, the Hamburglar, but turn it around, because if you are in a highly volatile, abusive situation, you never show your hand. Be very safe, get 2 phones. I mean, we could talk about all this on part 2, because I don't want anyone to put themselves in a dangerous scenario. So I'm glad we were able to identify and define what narcissist abuse looks like. And now we're going to discuss in the next part how you could possibly get yourself away from it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And also, I do want to add, just as two resources, that if anyone feels that they're in immediate danger, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is an incredible anonymous resource. You can text, you can call, you can live chat, and they can help give you resources that are near you. And also NAMI, N-A-M-I, is a mental health hotline that you can call also anonymously. So they're both really great tools.
Excellent. Yeah, both of those are stellar and reputable. And thank you, Autumn, so much for saying that.
Yes.
So thank you for what you have done, for being so brave and inspiring. And I know that you're helping a lot of people out there who otherwise wouldn't have a place to go and a person to talk to. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you.